Hello, scholars and other adventurers. Welcome to a one-bar Necromancer build using the Oakensoul ring. The gear is not as simple as the previous one. Of course, also, disclaimer, the Oakensoul ring requires Western Skyrim for the Antiquities and High Isle for the leads in order to get the ring. When it drops an infused and gives you these bonuses. It comes with Tristat glyph on it, and I have put a spell damage glyph. If you are remaking it, then make it in Bloodthirsty. Infused is not bad, it's probably second best, but Bloodthirsty is what you want. I'm not running an execute on any of these builds. It's paired with Sergeants, like the other ones. Sergeants on the chest, jewelry, and Lightning Staff. Lightning Staff is precise with a frost glyph on it. The jewelry is Bloodthirsty with spell damage. Cuirass with Magicka and Divines. All the body pieces are in Divines. It's paired with the Slimecraw shoulder. You can also use the head and use the Relequens on the whatever piece you don't have. So this is the one that has a lot more work involved. Relequens has come out clearly on top out of all the sets I've tried, and I've tried quite a few. Now, there's a couple that came pretty close together in second place, and so we'll take a look at those as well. You'll need to change a skill out to use at least one of them. So, Relequen is a trial set. It comes from Cloud Rest. You only need to run it at normal. If your guild's not running it, that's where Craiglorn is always very helpful. Go in, see if someone's running it on normal, and just go through it. It was clearly in first place, which is why it's on the build. All in Divines. It is a medium set. Magicka glyphs on all the body pieces. Medium is actually quite helpful, as it does increase your crit damage. Also gives you a lot more maneuverability, since you're getting your Magicka back with your heavy attacks. Getting your stamina back by wearing the medium armor is very helpful. So the other options that are, one's quite easy to get, but it is the same thing that both your Warden and your Sork would be wearing, which is the Undaunted Unweaver. The only change you need to make to the setup in order to use that is changing the Stalking Blastbones to Blighted Blastbones. That one uses stamina. And since you're using it all the time, you're constantly proccing your Unweaver. That's the only change you need, just a different morph. So I also looked at Azure Blight. That one's a little harder to get, probably in some ways harder than getting Relequen. It might not actually be easier to get than the Relequen itself. But it worked quite well with either the setup that I've currently got with the Stalking Blastbones. It also worked as well with the stamina version. Either one will work. This one gives disease damage and it explodes. So it's very nice in an AoE situation, and it was constantly proccing with all the dots that we had going. So nice if you've got it. It's a nice alternative. You're going to swap gear back and forth using Wizard's Wardrobe. You put this on for the trash and put your Relequen on for a single target. The Undaunted Unweaver behind the trial dummy was the same as the Azure Blight, if not maybe a little bit better. But in an AoE situation, Azure Blight would probably win. I did try Caluurion's, and I could cut a little clip in here. And that's what the proc looks like and why I really, really wanted it to work. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It came in way third. So, Relequen, clear winner. Undaunted Unweaver, an easy out, because it's very easy to get. Since you already have the body pieces, you're probably already going to use it on your Warden and your Sork. Definitely the Sork, definitely the Warden. It's much more appropriate in either one of those two builds, but it does work here. long as you have the Blighted, Blastbones, and not the Stalking. Let's look at the CP. So because it's a heavy attack build, and you're only using one bar and you're continuously using your staff, you're going to really want the Steadfast Enchantment CP to reduce the wear and tear on your enchantments. Otherwise, I'd still, even with that, recommend that you have an add-on that recharges your staff for you. Blue Tree. So, in Warfare, the most important slottable is your Weapons Expert. It buffs your heavy attacks by 20% when it's fully filled out. These passives, get them when you can. If you have the CP, then just get them. You're doing magic, frost, and shock damage, and disease damage. So buffing them is really important too. But slottables first. So your Weapons Expert, and then Deadly Aim. Your heavy attack is a direct single target with splash damage. So the single target part of it gets buffed by Deadly Aim. So those two are essential. Then Thurmaturge, because all of your abilities you're using are dots. So you want that one. In content where you're not in a boss fight where the boss is turned away from you, then you want Biting Aura. If you are going to be behind a boss, or fights like most of Cloud Rest, then you can just slot Backstabber. Most of the time you're going to be behind the boss and behind the ads because you have a tank and there's not that many ads. So you can just put Backstabber on before you go into Cloud Rest. If you're fighting dragons, you could slot Fighting Finesse, or you could just leave it with Biting Aura. And then you don't have to worry about changing it when you're in Sunspire and fighting dragons. So I recommend these two for the most part. This one, if you're in those certain situations where you could either A, change it out, or in those situations where you know you're mostly going to be behind the targets anyway, behind the bosses and the mobs. Red CP, these two are your fairly standard, but because we are constantly returning our Magicka, we don't need siphoning spells. You should swap that one out for your stamina recovery and strategic reserve for open world. If you're in group content, especially group content where you're expecting one of your colleagues to die, one of your teammates, slot Spirit Mastery. That is it's really the DPS's responsibility to pick their colleagues up off the floor should they die beside them. This will really help them get back into content much quicker. Let's look at the consumables. So I have, as I have in the other builds, she's using the Erateum Pickled Fishbowl because it comes with all these little golden boxes that you get on the PTS when you're made a max level character to try out various gears and things. It comes with that. So that's what she's got. It's a buy-stat food. A more expensive option for the buy-stats. There are much cheaper ones. You can also use Jagged Drenched Mud Balls, which give you max Magicka and max stamina. And the best one really for most things is Mistral Bunny Hash, Banana Bunny Hash, if you're searching for it. Max health and max Magicka, just like the Erateum Pickled Fishbowl. It only lasts for 2 hours instead of 2.5. Oh, no, she doesn't have medical use plotted out, so it's only showing up as 2. And works, I mean, it really works. Also, I recommend having alts that are running heavy attack builds that don't have their provisioning leveled up very far. You could give them Princess Delight or Sweet Sanguine Apples or Old Aldmeri Orphan Gruel. Those all give max Magicka, and you don't need to be very high level provisioning. Like one of them is like provisioning level 2 in order to create them. So it's a good emergency backup when they've run out of their food that their main crafter has been making for them. And this is good in a pinch. It gives you 5,600 max Magicka, and most of them last for an hour. You can also use the Crown Fortified meals. They're free. You can see that the stats are lower. But when you're just running around the world, and these are free and you've got stashes of them for the last 4 years, just use them. There'll come a point when we'll have to go back to using expensive food again, but right now, you don't need it. The other thing you don't need is the expensive spell pots. Tri-stat potions are really all you need, and if you've got piles of these crown ones, just use them. If you don't have crown ones, then I do recommend using something it's actually a PvP one usually. Potions of immovability. Resist knockbacks and disabling effects for 10 seconds. And you can make them with Columbine, Bugloss, or Blogloss, depending on how you like to say it, and Numera's Rod. The 10 seconds is 10.4 if you've got your medical use. So that covers food and potions. Looking at passives, since we're here, that the heavy had penalties. That's the penalties there. And you're wearing all medium armor, so I recommend getting all of those. For your light armor, if you're wearing your light Slimecraw, then I recommend that you have Grace and Prodigy. It's worth having all of them if you got the CP or the skill points to use, but otherwise Prodigy, Grace, and Heavy, Juggernaut, which increases your healing received for that one piece you're wearing, and Constitution, increasing your health recovery. Those two are your better ones if you don't have enough to fill them all in. Skills. We are using Detonating Siphon. This version as opposed to the other version. And this one explodes at the end. It's all disease damage. While it's slotted, your damage is done is upped by 3% for having the skill there. Using Avid Boneyard as opposed to the other morph, because the other one will fear people, and we don't want that. So Avid Boneyard gets frost damage. Any allies in it can use a synergy and detonate, deal frost damage. Stalking Blastbones. And remember, if you're using Undaunted Unweaver, you're going to be using Blighted Blastbones. That's using stamina to proc your Unweaver. Does essentially the same thing. It jumps at the enemy and blows up. This one deals flame damage. The other one does disease damage. And this one does more damage if it travels farther, but since most cases and most fights are not a huge distance away, so it doesn't make that much of a damage difference. The other one also puts Major Defile on the enemy. And Skeletal Arcanist. You can opt for, if you haven't got that far, but you've got your fighter skill leveled up, go with Lightweight Beast Trap. They both 20 seconds, and both seemed about equal. This one added bleed damage. There's no other bleed damage in the build, so that's also very helpful, adding another status effect called Hemorrhage. But this one does shock damage, and they came out about the same. So either one. Necrotic Potency. This is because while you're slotted, the damage taken is reduced by 3%. It says, sap the living life out of fresh corpses, granting you 6 ultimate in healing. So basically it's a heal if you need it, and it's a mitigation. So I just leave there. I don't tend to use it. And we're running Shooting Star from the Mage's skill line. It's both a bar buffer and it does more damage. It also costs a little less. It's only 200 ultimate versus the other ultimate you can use that works is under Gravelord, and it's Pestilent Colossus. Both of them, if this one had procced a little bit faster, probably would have been about the same. But I found that Shooting Star, because it just came faster, you used it faster, it was just more effective. It's also easier. It isn't ground targeting like this is. You have to draw the ground target on the enemy. This one, it happens if you're already looking at the target, like any of the other skills. Far as passives go, this one is, of course, it's the last one you get. But it increases your damage done by 10% for your dots, your overtime effects. This one is your critical strike chance for each Gravelord ability slotted, and we're using Avid Boneyard and Stalking Blastbones, and the Skeletal Archer, and this one. So you can see that we're at 32% right now. The only one out of this we're using is Necrotic Potency, but I think most of these, if I remember correctly, do not need a Bone Tyrant ability slotted except for this one, which restores stamina magicka to you. The enemy dies within 28 meters. These ones all are just mitigation, which you can use. When you use this, you do get the mitigation, so that's handy. Though this one increases your healing received when you have one slotted, which is that one. And this just increases your max health if you don't have, even if you don't have anything slotted. So these two, more important than any of the other ones. We only have the one skill slotted. And we don't have any of these slotted. There are some here that don't require a skill slotted or to be active, so you could take those if you wanted to. That's pretty much it. The weapon, of course, the Destro, we're not using any of the skills on it, but for holding it, you get most of these anyway. I don't think any of them require you to have an ability slotted. You just need to have a Destro. Ancient Knowledge, Elemental Focus, Tri-Focus, those ones. These two, not necessary. If you covered armor, Mage's Guild, we are carrying one of the abilities, the Shooting Star. So there are some in here, cost of guild abilities, which is probably why it's not 225, it is just 200, because that's filled in. Duration is increased, magic and recovery, which doesn't matter, and grants and power, which doesn't matter. So really what you want is that one, and just increasing the duration of your Shooting Star. And of course we mentioned medical use, which increases the effects of your potions for 30% more, your provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur, increasing your food. So there we go. Those are all the skills that you need to get started. There are swap outs if you need them. Spirit Guardian could go in instead of this. It's more maintenance. And I have run with braided tether before as well. But this one, just from sitting there, is very useful. And it's instant. It's very much like, it's basically like a Betty Netch, right? It's just giving you health return instead of stamina or magicka, depending on the morph. And it just needs to sit there. Okay, with all that, let's do a parse. Ignore the glitch of Relequen, at least proof that it was working. And give it a start. Like that. Send in a Blastbones. You want to make sure there's a body on the ground when you cast your Avid Boneyard, because it does 30% more damage when there's a skeleton, or I don't know, a colleague on the ground. Turn those rugs into something useful as a necromancer. Alright. Just keeping down the dots, trying to make sure that when you have a skeleton on the ground when you cast your Avid Boneyard. And try and keep your dots up and not fall off like I do. And there, Comet's ready again. Cast it. That's it. I will see you at the end. So that was 75. 0.1. Not bad. And a little hit because I didn't get away in time and he triggered again. So Azure Blight and Undaunted Unweaver were coming in about 70k on average, and Relequen's coming in probably 74, 75, and I've had 77 for good parses, but on average it's probably more like 74. And again, that's on a target dummy, trial dummy, on the PTS. Don't expect that in content for the most part. You can get pretty darn good in certain situations, you know, with a tank behind a boss that you get to stand, like Samaja or Dragons or the last boss in the end of Dreadsail Wreath. In content, running around, you'll probably do 40, which running around in content is pretty darn good. Don't sweat it. If you don't have all the gold gear, you don't have it all in Divines yet, just put it together, work on the skills, get them leveled up, and you should be good to go. And fashion. Iliad Royal Crown, which is a hat. And it was in the same colors as this. So Ebonheart epaulets and Celestial gloves. Ifray's Will robe, Bloodforged sash, and Malka's shoes, because I felt she did something at least that was orcish. The colors are Void Pitch Black, which I almost have. Maybe I will have shortly after this is posted. Voidstone Violet, Patron's Gold, and that's on everything, including the hat. It was both Void Pitch and both slots. The staff, which you can't see here. There we go. That's, I believe, Solzan. Yeah, Solzan staff. Like the little green glowy glass, the jade pieces. And that's, again, in Void Pitch and in Bedlam. I hope that helped. So, scholars, if you do have any questions, I'm on Discord. I'm in the game very often. So just let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. If you need to help run for any gear on Thursdays, you can just put it in the events chat and say, I'm looking to run this because I need it for X, and that's what Help Desk is for. I'm there to help. And if you're an adventurer out there in ESO and you've got questions about the build or questions about managing keyboard layouts for burgeoning arthritis or tendonitis and various different kinds of hand damage, I can help with that a little bit too. I will be making a video on my keyboard layout and how much that helps keeping your fingers straighter in content. So that's it. That's the 1-bar Oakensoul Necro. I hope you find it more approachable. I know that I do. I didn't like my 2-bar Necro very much, so she didn't get run. This is infinitely simpler and way more fun, so she gets used all the time now. Have a good day and enjoy adventuring, and take it easy.